For a long time, we believed we knew where we came from. We built our story from stones and tools, from burials and from objects that endured in the ground. It was a good story, but it was not the whole story. When Europe began to warm around 14,500 years ago and the ice sheets started to retreat, the land was not empty, and it was not finished. We began to move. Our ancestors traveled slowly northward, following animals, water, and the rhythm of the seasons. They did not know they were part of history. They did only what humans have always done. They searched for life. For a long time, we thought this was enough to explain us. But only very recently did we learn to listen to something that had been there all along. We learned to read DNA, and then we understood something essential. Europe's history was not wrong. It was incomplete. DNA did not tell us about heroes or nations. It told us about movement, about encounters, and about people who mixed with one another long before they knew they belonged anywhere. This is the story of what DNA tells us. About us, the first settlers of Europe. When the ice began to withdraw, Europe changed. A landscape that had long been silent and frozen began to live again. The glaciers retreated, forests spread, animals returned, and we followed. We did not arrive all at once. We did not take the continent in a single great movement. We moved in small groups, slowly, following game, water, and the rhythm of the seasons. We were hunters and gatherers, mobile people in a world that belonged to no one yet. For a long time, we thought these people were only a phase, that their story was erased when later cultures arrived. But DNA tells us something else. It tells us that these people did not disappear. They did not fade into the darkness of history. They are still within us. In our genetic code are traces of people who sat by campfires 10,000 years ago. People who knew every river and every path taken by animals. Their world was not simple. It required skill, memory, and the ability to adapt. This was Europe's first settlement, not an empire, not a people, but a life shaped by the rules of nature. And even as the world changed around them, we still carry their story with us. For a long time, our world was in motion. We followed animals. We moved our camps with the seasons. The land did not belong to us. We belonged to the land. But then something changed. Not everything moved anymore. People arrived in Europe who carried with them a new idea. The land can be claimed. They planted seeds. They built permanent homes. They stayed. And when we search for where they came from, our gaze turns south. Anatolia, the Konya Plain in present-day Turkey, a region where humans shifted from gathering to farming and where the land sustained a new way of life. For a long time, it was thought that Europeans simply adopted the idea of farming. That knowledge traveled, but people did not. But DNA suggested otherwise, and the breakthrough came when we learned where to look for DNA. A small bone in the inner ear, the petrous bone, preserves genetic material exceptionally well. When samples began to be taken from it, the past started to speak with new precision. It became clear that farming did not arrive in Europe only as a skill, but also as people. Anatolian farmers migrated into Europe. They brought with them their way of life and their genes, and their genetic signature appears in the very places where farming first emerges. Over centuries and millennia, their descendants continued westward and southward, toward the islands of the Mediterranean and all the way to the edges of Iberia. At first, the groups did not mix much. There were encounters, but boundaries existed in everyday life: who was considered one of us and who was not married into. This was not only a new skill, it was a new way of seeing the world. Suddenly, life was no longer based on movement, but on waiting, on the success of the harvest, on the unpredictability of the seasons. We do not know how the first encounters unfolded. Did hunter-gatherers see farming people as a threat or as an opportunity? DNA does not give us words, but it tells us the encounter was real. Not everyone merged immediately. Groups lived side by side, sometimes apart, sometimes close. This was not a peaceful transition. It was a slow, tense transformation. A new way of life spread, not because it was better, but because it allowed more people to live. And when there are more people, the world changes with them. In our story, this was the first great turning point. The moment when everything familiar began to give way, and nothing ever returned to what it had been. Change does not ask for permission. When it arrives, it does not ask whether we are ready. It simply comes. Around 5,400 years ago, another shift appeared across Europe, a new culture, corded Ware, named for the cord impressions pressed into wet clay. Their pots and burials left clues, but their DNA left an even stranger one. A distinct layer of ancestry, something not common among earlier Neolithic farmers. A signal pointing east, toward the steppe and the forest steppe, toward older connections deep in Eurasia. And then came the third wave. Around 5,000 years ago, from the steppes of southern Russia and eastern Ukraine, people began to move toward Europe. The Yamnaya. They did not build permanent villages. They did not wait for crops. They moved. Faster than anyone before them. The horse changed everything. Distances collapsed. Time shortened. The horizon came closer. Movement became power. They carried herds, tools, and new practices. They knew the wheel, not as a symbol, but as a device for motion itself. We do not know what the first encounter felt like. Only dust on the horizon. Only a line of movement approaching. Only the sense that something new had entered the world. Was it a threat? Was it a chance to survive? Was it both? DNA tells us what stories did not preserve. This was not only culture spreading, this was people moving. Fast, forceful, wide. In some regions, older ways nearly vanished. Some stayed, some left, some disappeared. And DNA still carries the mark of that turning point. A time when Europe was reshaped permanently. And in the shadows of that movement, something else moved too. In some remains from this period, researchers have found traces of the plague bacterium, the DNA of disease. We cannot know how it felt then. We cannot map fear in the bones. But we can see that pathogens traveled along with people. This was not the story of one people. It was the story of transformation, leaving a trace in all of us. After so much movement, it is easy to focus on what was lost. Ways of life, languages, worlds that did not survive. But DNA reminds us of something else. Nothing vanished completely. People mixed. Life continued. We are not the heirs of a single group or a single moment. We are the result of many journeys. The patience of hunters, the persistence of farmers, the adaptability of people who lived on the move. All of it still lives in us. And when we speak of languages, one legacy keeps returning. The timing of the steppe expansion aligns with the spread of Indo-European languages. The details are debated, the arguments continue, but the imprint is profound. DNA does not divide us into winners and losers. It does not tell us who was right. It tells us we survived, together. When we look at Europe today, we see borders and languages. But when we look at DNA, we see connection. A story that belongs not to one nation, but to all of us. We are not the end of history. We are its continuation. And perhaps that is why this story matters now. For a long time, we searched for answers in the ground, but in the end, the answer was found within us. DNA did not give us a simple origin, it gave us movement, encounters, and people shaping Europe step by step, generation by generation, across thousands of years. We are not the heirs of one story. We are the result of many journeys. And when we look into the past through DNA, we do not only see where we came from, we see why we are here. This story does not end with us. It continues.